a couple of people, right when I was standing in the back, came up to me, they said, please say something optimistic. And I think the only thing I can say that's optimistic is that the season is almost over. And while that's a joke on one level, I think there's a truth to this, which is the skiing portion of our business. Obviously, one of the things I want to talk about is the year-round possibilities in the mountains. But the skiing portion of our business does get a good 6 months to hope that things can get better. And I think there's a lot of reasons to think that things will be better. When you look at, my prediction is consumer confidence will not be at 26 in 6 months. Is it going to be at 110? No. So things will be better even if we're stabilized at a lower level. And I think that helps going into next year. Because right now, I think what's happening with our guests is that people are fearful. I mean, the uncertainty quotient is so high that actually somebody just saying, you know what, things aren't going to get better, but they're not getting worse. Even if we landed there within 6 months, I think that would actually help for next year. The other thing I guess that I could say that's optimistic is that typically misery loves company. And we've got a lot of company. And what I mean by that is I think this is very important for the mountain travel industries. A lot of people ask me, well, what do you think is happening? And I think it's important for us, not to be so insular or narcissistic to think that this is all about us. It's not about us. This is actually one of those moments where, we are caught up in mountain travel in a much, much bigger thing. In fact, the biggest thing that's happened to this country from a financial standpoint, in a century. Therefore, I think it's really important. I think it's one of the things that our company is going to be focused on is not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, this will be an awful year. I was just sharing with somebody earlier that we may not see the kind of declines in certain weeks that we saw this season, maybe ever again. I mean, we've seen such huge declines, particularly in some of the peak weeks. And as Mike said, in ski school as well, a business that has obviously been incredibly profitable for us, where, and I think Mike could probably attest to it, over 20, 30 years, a business that did not decline even through past recessions. This one, it got awful. But again, I think it's important to look at that and not say that there was something wrong with the mountain travel industry. I am a big believer in that. I think there are many, many strengths, as Mike outlined, that are still true today. And I think it's important for people to go back to that and not to kind of say, oh my God, we've got to start from scratch and figure out what we're going to do. At the same time, I think a lot of the things that are terrific about our industry can lull us a little bit into not making the changes that we need to make. And so as Mike said earlier, and I really agree with this, I think tried and true travel is really growing in terms of consumer acceptance, and so therefore, or what they prefer. And so therefore, what we're looking at is we have consumers who know what skiing is. Is this the best time to go out and get somebody who's never skied before to your mountain? Probably not. But it is a good time to keep the skiers who you already have. And that's something that I think gives us a huge opportunity. I think the authentic travel and being connected to nature, although I haven't seen numbers over the last 6 months, active family travel has been growing, one of the fastest growing areas within the travel industry. Families and multi-generational travel, it all bodes incredibly well for skiing. And the ski industry, and as Mike knows, I've been involved in it in one way, shape, or form since 1991, and people have been talking about how it's not a growth industry, it's not going anywhere, blah, 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 all these things. And then even when snowboarding came around, all of a sudden people said, well, that's going to be the holy grail. Well, that turned out initially not to be the holy grail. People just moved from skiing to snowboarding. We didn't really see any traction on that. But I think we actually nailed something huge, which is, while today everybody talks about the baby boomers, and now we have to make sure that we're dealing with the fact that they are moving out one side of the python, the echo boom, or the children of the baby boomers, is the second largest generation that anyone has seen in ever. That group, which is now in their kind of, let's say 12 to 25, they are starting to move through time. And I think one of the things that our industry did that was incredibly insightful, whether by luck or by genius, was the terrain park. It was providing the platform for folks like Sean Light to come up through. sudden our mountains are actually incredibly cool, have an incredible cachet with exactly the right demographic. And I can tell you from conversations that I've had, no offense to Mike in the golf club business, but I have had conversations with people in golf and other businesses that are looking for that. How do they get that cachet? Because skiing right now and snowboarding and on snow sports has that. And I think it's critical for us to see that, and we all know this, that all of the resorts used to go around mowing down anybody who created a small jump, right, in the middle of a ski trail. And literally, if anybody had a jump, people were jumping over it. So, the cat was sent there and gone. Now, we actually spent all this time creating the terrain parks, and we actually gave an award away for, a resort that had, the most unbelievable terrain park with the most hits and everything else. That is something that was a lot of creativity and something we should all take a lot of pride in as an industry, because it doesn't just happen every day in every industry. So, what I'm doing for next year, and I think this is really ultimately what we're all talking about, is this past year is done. What I'm doing for next year is saying to myself, okay, what are the things that we know we do well? What are the core strengths that we know we can rely on? What are the things about our guests that we know bring them back year after year? One. But two, how can we change? How can we not get stuck in some of the old traditions of the industry? And as many people know, our company has made certain changes since I've been here, and I think we'll continue to make some. And sometimes that rubs people the wrong way, and I'd be the first person to say, don't just change things to change things. Don't just throw everything up in the air. But at the same time, we've got a foundation that's incredibly secure. We really do. I mean, I would rather, if I could pick any place in travel to be right now, I would pick the mountain resort industry. And I say that because I think you look around the rest of the landscape, and the amount of oversupply and the amount of carnage is huge. And we are actually pointed in the right direction. But we can't rely on the success that we had over the last 5 years. And so the past product, I don't know whether I took it from the water park business, but maybe. But what I would say though is that I think, trying to get more commitment from our guests, trying to get people to buy in even more to the industry, taking weather out of the industry was one of the first things that Ralph and I talked about early on in the season, was this back and forth between, does the economy trump snow? And what I would say is that I think snow will trump the economy on any given day. You might have, and we've seen it in Vail, or any of our resorts, all over Colorado and in Heavenly. Yeah, if we get great snow, everybody shows up for that day. But a lot of those people are locals, are on passes, they're not spending a lot of money. From a business standpoint, there is really no question that the economy is what drives this. And I think it's important for the industry to kind of make sure we constantly reconnect back into that. The other thing that I would say is, and I think this is being borne out even right now in the Northeast. So I think when this season, when the obit is written on this season, what we're going to see is that the Northeast, I think, performed very, very well. And I don't think, but that's not because of snow. That's because of something that Mike mentioned as well, which is, I don't know, about maybe a little bit more than a staycation, but staying close to home. So we know this within Colorado. People are basically, anybody who bought one of our passes is saying, this pass is my vacation for the next 6 months. Right? I'm not going to go buy another vacation because I can just go up and ski. And I think we saw that in the Northeast as well, where people said they're not going to get on an airplane and fly out to another destination. It's not the snow. It is the economy. And I think it's critical for the industry as a whole, and it's something that we're going to try and lead, I think, as a company, constantly looking for that next innovation, constantly doing something different, but not forgetting what brings our folks to our resorts each and every day. And I think one of the things that Mike said is true. I think it is, the ski resort business is definitely a little bit odd. Having come from, Wall Street, I guess, in the beginning of my career, you look at the ski industry and you say to yourself, well, it's weather, and it's one of the few places you travel, right, that didn't even really start as a business. It started kind of like a sport or just recreation and then turned into this business. But I'd also say this, the level of passion and commitment that our guests have for what we provide is off the chart. And I for those of you who have been in other places of travel, you know, it just doesn't exist. And I think a great example, and I'll kind of end on this, is, you know, to a certain extent, obviously, we just sat through and listened to a whole bunch of great awards being given out by On the Snow, and our company didn't win any. And, you know, typically you say, that sucks. But, you know, and I would also say that, you know, obviously we've got, you know, our company has 5 of the top 10 most visited resorts in North America. And when when it came time to name the favorite resort, we didn't win any of those either. But I think the interesting thing about Big Sky, and I think it's important, obviously, yeah, there's no question Big Sky does less skier days than our resorts, and quite frankly, a lot of the other resorts that were put up on the chart. But their customers are incredibly committed to Big Sky. They are incredibly passionate about Big Sky, and I think that's something that, you know, people really are connected to what we provide. And I think that's something that we should not forget as we go into next year, which is change as much as we can all around, but really stay true to the core. Thanks.